This is CXO Secrets, the podcast that takes you inside the minds of business and technology leaders and reveals the strategies behind their success. Coming up in today's show.
Everybody is really bought into the idea of the future. The bit that scares people is how we get from here to there. So that actual change program, how it will feel to them, what it will mean to them as individuals, that's the scary part. It's not that they don't love the idea of systems that are more intuitive to use or, capacity on demand via some sort of cloud service. Or it's not that. It's not that they don't like that feel or they're not happy with it. It's that they are worried on a very individual basis about what that will mean for them.
CXO Secrets is powered by EDS, going beyond connections. Find out about upcoming C-level events, experiences and insights at edsxevents.com. Sarah Leteney, CIO at Urenco Global. Thank you for joining us on CXO Secrets.
Delighted to see you, David. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you? Where are you? And what's your week look like so far?
So I'm actually at home this afternoon, which is really nice. We have a great thing at Urenco. We, in the head office team, we work 4.5 days, which means Friday afternoons are special time.
Oh.
Officially, non-working time. Practically, overspill time. Let's not forget that, practically the things that you couldn't quite fit into the week. Exciting podcasts, but also amazing because it means you always have an afternoon in the week when you can decide now is a good time to have a plumber. Let's arrange a dental appointment. All of those things. It's amazing. It's a brilliant little thing that the company does for us. So.
Very progressive indeed. And I guess that means that formal meetings, team meetings, one-to-ones and things shouldn't take place on that Friday afternoon to enable those extra things to happen unimpeded. I love that. Is that something that came in since the pandemic or is that something that's kind of emerged over time?
No, it's been there. It was there from before I joined. So I joined mid-pandemic. It was there well before that. So they've always been quite progressive. They look after their staff really well. It's actually one of the big sort of founding principles of the organisation.
Well, I know that we're going to come to the circumstances under which you joined Urenco in our chat later on. But today, I'd like to chat to you about Urenco and about the industry in which you work, uranium enrichment. Not surprisingly, something we've yet to speak about here on CXO Secrets, though we have spoken about the energy industry more broadly from time to time. Want to hear a bit more about your role there as CIO and what you've brought to your role now from your previous roles on the other side of the desk. Let's talk about what transformation looks like for you there right now. And then I think we might wrap up with some of the activities you engage in outside of your work nominally and how they also have been so valuable inside of your work. And of course, as with all of our guests, we'll not let you go without uncovering some of your CXO leadership secrets as well. Busy conversation for a Friday afternoon, but I hope that's all right for you.
Yeah, it will be excellent.
Right then, first of all, tell me about Urenco, uranium enrichment. I'm fascinated by this.
Okay, so Urenco is part of the global nuclear fuel cycle. Okay, We work specifically in what's called civil enrichment. So that means that we only work for energy generation. We don't do anything with weapons. We don't do anything with powering nuclear subs or anything like that. We do specifically enriching for the global nuclear power plant fleet. We are one of only 3 or 4 organizations in the world that does this kind of thing. It's a fascinating area and very heavily controlled, as you can imagine. Yeah. So there's ourselves and there's a company called Urenco who are based in France. France has an enormous nuclear fleet. Urenco looks after that.
Yeah, it does.
And then there are a couple of other enrichers which commercially provide services, one in China and one in Russia. When all the problems kicked off in Ukraine, there was quite a significant shift in the global market. I'm sure you can understand that. Lots of countries started to think about energy independence in a way that they hadn't done before. So our market has massively shifted since the Ukrainian invasion happened. It's been quite substantive, a complete change in our strategy over the time since then. In fact, you have to give all kudos to our strategy team who managed to turn around our strategy within about 3 months of that happening. And we have literally put the pedal to the metal to really start to try and supply, I suppose you might call it the NATO aligned world, I mean the sort of the Western aligned world very heavily.
Which is itself changing rapidly, let's face it.
Oh, it is. It is, yes. It's always exciting to see what's happening. Definitely across the pond, things are changing on a almost hourly basis, it would seem sometimes. But
So in that, who actually owns Urenco then? Because I think that's quite an interesting story too, isn't it?
Yeah, we were established under international treaty, which is such an unusual way for an organisation to come about. Yeah. But a couple of governments and a couple of energy firms that actually own us. So we're not floated on the stock exchanges or anything of that kind. Yeah, but we do have our stakeholders. And just like any stakeholders and shareholders, they very much enjoy dividends and they like to see lots of profitability coming through their organisation. But yeah, two governments and 2 energy firms that own us.
But you are based, or Urenco's HQ in Paddington in London, England. Tell me about your remit there as CIO. Fascinating company, as you've explained there, the history and the dynamism, particularly with the current market, international political dynamics that are out there. How does that play into your role there as CIO? Because CIO in some organisations, they've got a very, very not a strict remit, but it's very, very clear what is and isn't in their sphere. But from a conversation we were having when we joined this call earlier on about the relationship that you have with your CFO and the relationship that you have with, understanding the role that tariffs play, it seems as though your CIO remit's very broad there.
So Urenco doesn't have a huge number of staff. Okay. We turn over a load of cash, right? 2.5 to 3 billion euros. It's a very profitable organisation. We only have about 3,000 people that work within the organisation to generate that amount of cash going through it. What that means is every person that works at Urenco is almost like a fee earner in a commercial organisation like a consultancy, right? Every single human is important in the way that the organisation works. So I look after the business networks, anything associated with the movement of information, the control of information asset, if you like, within our organisation. And that covers the internet-facing networks that we have and also the networks which look after our intellectual property. So I own all of that sort of area to look after to make sure that it works for everybody. What I don't do today is I don't work in the OT space. I don't own the remit of operational technology. So that world inside the plant, that is looked after by our amazing plant staff who spend a lot of time and effort making sure that everything is safe and secure inside there. But we are starting to look at where those two must come together in the future. Because the reality is, if you are using a mass spectrometer, as we do inside our organisation today, you very often have a PC which drives that mass spec. And that PC still needs to be protected, just like any PC does anywhere outside in the world. And just because it's in an air-gapped an air-gapped physical location doesn't mean it doesn't have to be patched, and it needs to be updated, and it needs to go through all of that normal stuff. So today, the guys in the OT world have to provide those services, and we're currently looking about the possibility of actually using people within my organisation to manage and maintain that hygiene for the guys over there so that they don't have to keep on top of all of that kind of thing, and to slowly bring together the OT and the IT organisations to allow us to really take advantage of economies of scale in the way that you only can if you've got people doing that stuff in more than one location.
Yeah, and that is not an uncommon conversation, as I'm sure you're aware from chatting with your peers, particularly in the manufacturing space where there's a lot of OT energy as well, like where you are, about bringing those two worlds, the IT and the OT worlds together. But one of the challenges, well, you tell me, but one of the challenges that I hear a lot is that they're very different backgrounds, in some senses, very different risk profiles sometimes, though everyone's risk averse, but just a different sense of speed, because OT technology, because it has traditionally been air gapped for so long, it hasn't had to have the regular patch Tuesday that you might have had on the IT side. So there's a very different speed, a very different dynamic between these two worlds, and bringing them together is interesting from a technical point of view, from a risk point of view, also from a kind of cultural point of view as well. So I guess these are some of the understanding these risks and finding the ways in which these two worlds can work together. I guess this is part of this journey that you're on by the sounds of it.
It absolutely is. And the speed thing is really interesting, actually, because there's two elements to the speed. The first thing is, traditionally, the OT environments have not been patched as frequently. They've not been looked after quite as frequently, for definite. But also, when they need to do something with the OT systems, they have to do it right away. So if there is a failure with that PC, they do not want to stop and raise a change request and go to a cab and work through the 15 paper forms you might have to enable you to confirm that you're able to go live on Tuesday afternoon. Those guys, they have to keep our systems working effectively, and they need to be very responsive in that moment. So you've got both ends of the speed issue. And actually, when we talk about the cultural fit between the two sides of the organization, most of the time that cultural dynamic is that juxtaposition between being able to do it immediately in that second when they have to do something, and having all the rigorous requirements of checking that you're not about to break something, and how you actually blend those two together. We don't expect our OT and our IT teams to come together tomorrow or anything like that, but we do expect them to get closer and closer over time. And we are trying to put in place the appropriate communication channels between the two so that we can start to learn from each other. So in one of our plants in Europe, they've already started to use our CMDB, our standard CMDB, right? It's such a simple sharing thing, but by using that standard CMDB, now their job of looking after their plant systems has become simpler. And actually, just by demonstrating that same process can be used across both of those areas, in that European site, we now have a closer communication between those two groups. So those humans are getting to know each other a little bit better. Trust develops through that level of conversation. And we are starting to see a genuine willingness to cooperate in a way that people are sometimes a little standoffish, right? If they're not quite sure of each other, they hear things they might not know. Just by bringing together something as simple as the use of a CMDB, we're starting to see that level of communication really, really blossom, which is great.
As well as the benefits of economies of scale, using the same platform across the organisation and so on. Fascinating insights, fascinating journey. And that IT OT melding, or at least complementary journey, is something that I know we're going to be chatting about a lot more over the next couple of years, certainly here on this show. Let's take a bit of a step back, though. Your career path leading into Urenco, you've spoken about how attractive a place it is to work for various reasons, including the kind of 4.5-day week that you have there. What was your journey up to Urenco opening its doors to you?
Well, I started life as a biologist. I was going to work for a big biology firm. I was going to work for someone, I don't know, like a Pfizer or, something like that. I was going to be a research scientist. I was going to be in a lab. I was going to spend lots of time with test tubes, and I was going to thoroughly enjoy that. And I had an amazing time at university. I did 3 years post-grad work, post my degree, had a great time, except for the fact that it turned out, as many of the students there told me that I didn't believe when I was doing my undergrad, that I really didn't like the postgrad world. I really didn't enjoy it. Right. It was not fun. It involved me and plants and no people. And I was not happy at that moment. So
you can talk to plants. Come on, we all know that. You can talk
to them. They don't say much back to you. So in a fit of pique one afternoon, from standing in a field and getting really, really wet in the northwest, which is the wonderful place to live, but oh my goodness, it's wet. Getting horribly wet in the middle of a field, stood with some cows. I actually went back in a fit of pique to the office and I said, that's it. I'm going to go and find another job. So I bobbed off to what was then the careers room. And do you know what? They don't have careers rooms anymore, but I'm that old that they did at the time when I did it. And I picked up a form off a desk, and this form said that they were looking with people with a scientific background or a numerical background that might be interested to learn about business systems and how they might provide advisory services to business systems. So I thought, I can do this. So I picked up my pen and I filled out the form and I posted it. And I didn't really think much after that, if I'm perfectly honest, and was lucky enough to be called back for an interview and then proceeded to go through selection panels and what have you, and ended up working for what was then Pricewaterhouse and is, of course, now PricewaterhouseCoopers within their management consultancy arm. And they essentially taught me how to be an IT consultant over a tremendous 5-year graduate program. I know things are different there now. They do things in a different way. But when I was there, it was an amazing graduate program that took the whole of 5 years. And I went through so many different IT related disciplines. So I started off as a C coder. I learned how to code in C. Did lots of work for organisations doing a point of sale systems, actually, really interesting, sort of quite low level technical stuff. Then I did some database designs and I did some project leading and system test management and all of those sorts of things. Proceeded over time to really find that the thing I liked the most of doing all of that was essentially project management of one kind or another. I then essentially specialised in project management, moved up. I spent 8 years at PwC, it was by then. Spent 8 years with them and left eventually only because having had my first child, I realised that I was actually not quite as flexible as I thought I was anymore. Things weren't quite the same anymore. So I did one of those little jumps that sometimes people do, and I left my desk one day, came back to work the next day in the same desk but with a different employer who was one of my then customers, one of the customers I was working from, which was EDS. EDS was the roads company, doesn't exist anymore, was taken over and became part of HP and then HPE and eventually DXC in their current world. And I spent a total of, I was there for 23 years, employed as a contractor for 3 and as a permanent member staff for 20 years. So huge amounts of exposure to loads of different technology companies. So from consultancy to outsourcing, as it was then, a whole managed service provision kind of thing. Learned, when I was at PwC, learned all about software and all about systems. And at EDS and HP, very much about hardware and about that whole sort of the full stack idea and things that you might do. Spent a lot of time working with UK government sectors. That was the sort of area that I worked within that organisation. And then as I got towards the end of my time with them, they actually started to adopt a model very like the Spotify model that people talk about. We talked about having tribes and guilds and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And my sort of last internal position, if you like, with them was to look after the workplace tribe for the European, the UK public sector within the European market. And one of my customers inside there was this little company called Urenco. And I had about 66 customers at that time. And I spent far too much time with that little company because they were fascinating. They were really, really interesting. And I was fortunate enough, having concluded the next level of outsourcing deal, having signed all of that up, to be invited by their then CIO to come along and have a conversation with him about taking over a role which he had a member of his team who was leaving, and he was going, we've got on really well. It's worked well during this conversation here. How do you feel about coming and actually realizing what we were trying to design with the DXC outsource community? How do you feel about coming here and helping us realize it on this side of the fence, inside the user end, if you like, of the organization? And I think it took me about, could be maybe 80 or 90 seconds to think that might be a good idea, that I might quite fancy doing that. It was a moment where I was coming towards the end of something within DXC, and this had opened up, and I was very connected to it and really quite committed to the positive experience of their user community. I was so lucky to find myself in that moment when they had an opportunity that might work for me. It was all handled extremely professionally with DXC, actually, because of course it's always difficult, that joining between the two, handled extremely professionally on both sides of the fence. I made the move over, and that was in October 2021. Unfortunately, the CIO that I had gone to work with was then unwell for a little while, and the team asked me if I would interim to look after the group as they went forward, which I did. And then I had a very, very long job interview. I think it was about 15 months I interimed for.
Oh, gosh.
And then my boss, who is the CFO at our organisation, essentially invited me to take that position permanently, having done the external checks I wanted to do and go through that whole thing. And here I find myself. So I have been here since then.
So from a muddy field with a test tube in hand somewhere in the northwest, stomping off, landing on your feet with PwC, EDS, HPE, DXC, working with Urenco on one side of the table on a consultancy engagement, and then switching sides and becoming CIO at Urenco. That's a fascinating journey, and I'm curious, particularly with that last step, having worked in consulting services for a while. Now that you're on the CIO side of the table, still working with essentially your former selves, how does that shape your approach? How does that shape your relationship with consultancies, with outsourcers, with suppliers coming into Urenco?
Yeah. So when I made this move, I thought I would find it straightforward, right? I thought I would go in, I would sit with the internal team, and I would be able to translate for them why it was that the outsourced community was behaving in the way it was. I thought this is going to be, it'll be easy. I'll get this because having lived it, I know exactly how that's happening. What I actually found when I came over to this side is it took me not very long at all to recognize what an incredibly different perspective you have of the same contract document, an incredibly different perspective that you bring to the two. So from this side of the fence, now, as I look out, I see that contract as the beginning of the relationship. It's just the table stakes that we are working towards. It gives us some edges to what we do. It gives us an edge that we can sort of butt up against and understand where each other sits, if you like. But it's just the beginning of a conversation. When I was on the other side of the fence, I thought of it as the be all and end all. Like, this is, if I do all of these things, they'll be really happy.
Yeah.
And we're totally not. They do all of those things. By the way, I'm not having a go at DXC. I have multiple suppliers, important to say, multiple suppliers inside the organisation. And the experience is the same with all of them. The contract is the beginning of our discussion, the beginning of our relationship. And really importantly, the contract is malleable, right? I can put changes into that contract. So if we are finding a problem with service 123, and it's because the contract is written in a particular way, we can go in and change it. We together can go in and change that contract and make a difference. And my huge message to those outsourced service providers out there would be, please remember that the contract can be changed. Things can be done differently. Similarly, talking to my own team internally, having to explain to them that saying they'll be thinking aloud and they'll be saying, yeah, but the supplier should be doing that. And I'll go, well, why would the supplier be doing that? Well, because that's what we want. Well, has anybody told them that that's what we're actually looking for? Well, it's in the contract. Here we go. It clearly says here, it says, it clearly says there that they'll have availability at, 99.99% or whatever. So in what way does that relate to the fact that you don't like the shape of that service? And there will be a moment with our own team where we will sit back and go, have we thought about that? Have we actually explained it properly, one human to another, as to what it is that we're not seeing? So sentiment is something that you cannot measure with numbers, right? You can't go, I answered 14 calls this hour, so everybody's happy. No, I answered 14 calls this hour. None of them produced an end state that anybody liked, and everybody's unhappy, even though you've met the letter of that particular SLA within the contract. So it's just been it's been a fascinating change. And I actually see one of my primary jobs today is to try to get those two sets of people to communicate more effectively about what it is that they're seeing and feeling and why they're therefore behaving the way that they are in those situations going forward.
And I guess that's as much as in any professional role, one would hope that we have a degree of empathy, and as much as we understand our own position, we hope, but then we also try, if there is another party on the other side of the virtual table, we try and understand what their response is, what their wants and what their needs are, so that we can communicate, we can contract effectively. I think what you've just described there is, even when you do bring empathy to the role, until you are actually sat on the other side of the table, as empathic as you think you might be, there is just other context, other things that you see on the other side of the table that mean you're never going to quite get the full view there. So it sounds like what you're doing now is, with the benefit of seeing both of those perspectives, inwards and outwards, trying to bridge that gap a little bit further.
Yeah, absolutely that. And it is quite a challenge, genuinely quite a challenge. It's the number of times that you sit in a meeting and you're watching people pass each other. You're watching the conversation pass each other, and needing to allow that to play out to a certain extent, because you can't continually step in and go, what he meant was, what she said was. You can't do that all the time, but you're watching it happen in real time. It can be frustrating, very, very frustrating when you're seeing that. Because most of these people, right, they're lovely on both sides of the fence. Yeah. They're really nice people. They're trying to do the very best they can. And yet they are missing each other in meaning.
So if that's part of your mission for now, to bridge those gaps, to smooth those relationships, to enable better outcomes for the supplier as well as for the organisation, just casting your mind forward, we're recording this towards the beginning of 2026, although it doesn't really feel that way still now. What are your targets? What are your missions? What are the objectives either you've been set or you're setting yourself throughout the rest of 2026, either from a kind of soft or a technical point of view? Is there anything that by the end of 2026 you can say, I've achieved this, or we have made solid progress in this area, and I'm happy that we've done that? Anything you're aiming to right now?
So we have 3 key deliverable items this year. And we've just been setting up the objectives for everybody in the team so that everybody can see that red thread from the strategic objectives of the organisation down through our objectives within our part of the organisation, down to every member of the team understanding what they're doing to actually provide some sort of cohesion with those new objectives. So the 3 things. Number 1, we are going to land our ERP transformation program this year. So
wow.
We are in the final year. It's due to go live right at the end of this year, and landing that change from ECC 6 to S4, because that's what we're doing, guys.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Massive change, massively huge amount of money, huge number of hours poured into it, and an absolute requirement to actually achieve the benefits that we said we would achieve when we put together the business case for doing this entire transformation. So that's happening this year. Huge thing, massive. The second thing is we are getting closer to our colleagues in the information systems organisation. So IS, INT and data and analytics, which sits within the INT portfolio as well, coming together to present a unified direction for the organisation, to bring home the concept of information as an asset. The fact that information in our world is as much an asset as these amazing centrifuges that we have, and my goodness, they are amazing. And we do pay a huge amount of attention to making sure that our physical asset is operationally excellence and moving forwards at all times and looked after really well in the maintenance cycles. We actually have to apply that same kind of discipline to what we do with our information asset. So we are bringing forward our new joint way of working. And myself and the CISO, who remains independent from me and absolutely should, completely different goals and aspirations and objectives for the organisation, that the two of us try and get closer and closer to each other so that we start to anticipate each other's needs and end up in a position where Okay, we may not both be in the room, but we can start to understand what the other person would say if they were there, so that we can avoid tripping over each other earlier on in the process. So that's a massive drive for us. It's called NGIS for us, Next Generation Information Systems, the idea of bringing together those groups, having this information as an asset. And the third one is we are going to save some money for our organisation. So
how are you going to do that?
Do more with less. Great question. We're currently working through exactly how we'll be doing that. But we'll be taking a not inconsiderable percentage cut in our budget. And we're doing this for a really great reason. It's not just your basic cost-cutting drive, right? It's not that. It's that I mentioned at the beginning of our conversation about this change in the market, which is in the enrichment market, things are really, really taking off massively. Our sales team are truly fantastic. They have landed a huge amount of new business for us. And in order for us to supply against that new business, those guys who are dealing with that physical asset, they're building new systems for us. They're refurbishing the old systems and they're building new systems for us. And those systems, they take a bit of time to come online.
Yeah.
So we have to try to do as much as we can with the available physical asset that we have today to get as much productivity out of that as it's possible to get, to deal with that, the leading and lagging indicator conversation, the one that goes, our sales have gone up, but we're still supplying against the old contracts at the moment. So our costs are going up behind the sales, costs going up slightly ahead of the sales revenue going up. So we need to make sure that we look after that margin, right? So the margin for the business needs to be looked after whilst we are very heavily investing to make sure that we can meet the energy demands of the world, if you like. So we need to look after the cost portfolio here, right now, today. And we need to make sure that all the money that we spend is directed specifically towards the goals of the organisation. So we are, as part of what we're calling the efficient growth programme. So we are growing, but we will do it with care and attention to the cost base that we have. So I will be taking a cut in the standard, the baseline cost of our I&T services for the organisation. And in the doing of that, I need to also prepare us for being able to accelerate quickly as the volumetric in the organisation increases in future. So you asked what I'm doing. What I'm actually doing is we are completely restructuring all the contracts that we have with our outsourced providers. We are completely restructuring the technical solution that we have. And we are changing the structure of our own people, our own team. So it's a massive shift.
Fascinating. And just to dwell on that final point very quickly, my initial comment was going to be, it's very rare that I've heard someone speak with so much enthusiasm and excitement about a cost reduction program. But what I want to say beyond that is that you've given me the why, and you've explained that so eloquently that I think it's very easy to go, oh no, XYZ company, we're tightening our belt strings. It's going to be difficult. Expense policy is going to be awful. There's going to be no travel. We're not going to have a new laptop for another 3 years or whatever. Pain, moan, groan. But actually what you've just done there is to explain the why in very, very clear terms. We're investing now. It takes us a while to build up capability. But in theory, in however long it takes your new centrifuges to come online, 2, 3, 4 years' time, when that investment starts to return, that is when the organisation as a whole will be able to benefit from that. And you explain that so clearly, I can't imagine anybody wouldn't be on board with that. And it comes back to taking people on the journey, which is absolutely a key. From all of the conversations I've had with CXOs over the years, it's taking people on the journey, even when there are difficult decisions to be made, especially when there are difficult decisions that need to be made. That is the key for keeping people motivated and on course and following that North Star, whatever it is that you want to call it.
I think one of the key things that I've noted is that when we talk about that future, what that future will be, everybody is in favour. Everybody is really bought into the idea of the future. The bit that scares people is how we get from here to there. So that actual change programme, how it will feel to them, what it will mean to them as individuals, that whole thing that's the scary part. It's not that they don't love the idea of systems that are more intuitive to use, or services of, capacity on demand via some sort of cloud service. Or it's not that. It's not that they don't like that feel or they're not happy with it. It's that they are worried on a very individual basis about what that will mean for them. And some of them are kind of excited and they really want to go on that change, and they're going, I can see loads more exciting work in this space. And other people are going, actually, I feel I'm kind of maxed already with what I'm trying to do. How will this affect me? Am I expected to deliver over and above now? Do I have to do all of this and all of that? How will that be? And it can be difficult to just see that road ahead. So part of our job as the leaders of the organisation is to try and hold people's hands on that journey, try to help them to understand that what is coming in the future is it's quite interesting, and there will be new things to do, new and exciting things to do. And that, no, we don't expect you to just do everything you do now and also do that as well. There will be a shedding of some things. There'll be some things we won't do anymore in the future. And that we actually, this is something which is thinking this through now, needing to talk to you about this in all quietness with the whole world watching, I'm sure. We know we need to get somewhere. We know that we have to get there, but we are still working the answer as to how we'll get there. So we're letting the information out about what we know as soon as it's safe to let it out, because it's solid enough that it won't change and it won't cause a problem. But I've said this a number of times to people in my team. There is no master plan which goes, we all know the answers, we're just not telling you. We're actually working those answers day to day, and things that happen day to day inform what those answers will be. So this isn't just a single master plan that just plays out over time. This is something that we are learning to do in it's an agile way. It's an agile change process that we're having to go through, and it can be quite uncomfortable sometimes. So we have to be there and accommodating with the guys who understand that it's a little bit difficult for them.
There are leaps of faith, and the metaphor that springs to mind is that, you look at your past and your future, and you all agree that you want to get to this future state, and you know what the other side of the ravine looks like. Now is your bridge to get from the past to the future. But to speak to the point you're making, you're building this bridge, but you can't quite see the other side yet. You know it's over there, and it might be a little bit hazy, might be a little bit misty, and you're building this bridge kind of like one section at a time, and you're going, yep, come on, we know it's over there, we know it's going to be worth getting to. We just don't know exactly the route that we're going to take to get there yet, and exactly what the bridge is going to look like. And it's bravery sometimes, and it's a power of persuasion that you as a CXO needs to have to bring the team on that bridge with you while you are still building it.
Yeah, it is. And it can be scary for me too, right? I make it sound like I'm all bought in and everything's fine. I have concerns about it. Of course I do. I worry about that because I worry about those people that I care about, that I see every day, and I see how hard they're working. I worry about what it will mean for my job, just like they worry about what it means for their job as well. But I think that one of the things that we try to bring all the time is the fact that everybody comes to work with positive intentions. Everybody comes in every day intending to do the best job they can do. Nobody walks in and goes, today I will be as obstructive as possible, right? Nobody does that. It doesn't happen. Obstructions still happen, but it isn't because the person on the other end is trying to be difficult. So we're learning this, right? We're learning every day about how best to describe things to people, how best to keep them informed, what are the most effective communication processes. It's a voyage of discovery as we continue forward.
Sarah, I feel as though I'm discovering an awful lot in our conversation today, and we could chat for hours, but I'm looking at the time and I need to let you get back to your magical Friday afternoon of free time. But before I let you go, there are some questions that we do ask to all of our guests here. This show is called CXO Secrets. So I have to ask you, although I feel as though you've spilled a lot of beans already, what is your CXO leadership secret? Put your modesty to one side for a moment. What's that attribute that has enabled you to do what it is that you do today, do you think?
It's all about people. It's all about people for me. It's all about the amazing human brain and the fact that we as a species, we're really good at making intuitive leaps and about recognizing patterns. I have ADHD. I didn't know that until relatively recently. And a large percentage of my workforce are neurodiverse, and they're amazing. They're incredible pattern recognizers. They're fabulous people to work with. And for me, it's all about harnessing every one of those people and getting the very best out of every one of them, right? It's not some sort of massive secret of mine. It's all of us together coming along that journey together.
We don't have time to go into it in great detail, but I know that outside of work, you have embarked on some counselling work, and that has also been very beneficial to you inside the workplace as well. Can you very briefly just tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. Before I left DXC, I decided that I would start to plan my future for post-retirement, and I thought I might be interested in counselling as a thing to do post-corporate world. So I embarked on a course and I got some qualifications in hypnotherapy and in counselling services, so psychodynamic counselling. And I did 250 hours of voluntary counselling, so nothing paid for, 250 hours or so of voluntary counselling, and was fortunate enough to spend quite a lot of time with certain people to take them through some really difficult situations. I did quite a lot of work with bereavement and that kind of thing. And what it gave me was a completely different picture of how home life and work life have got to learn to balance off against each other. And what it's done for me is it's allowed me to recognize when people are being pushed too hard, when the situation at home is such that this is not a person who we should be even asking to help with something new in this moment, because things are going on there that need to be allowed to have that the three-pronged stool, which is your work life, your home life, and your personal health and that kind of thing. If any one of those legs is kicked away, you can't ask for anything from that person in that moment. Doesn't mean they're not great. They're just not in that moment, and we all have to live with it.
We do a Pass the Question where guests on the show have an opportunity to put a question to a future guest, whoever they may be. And we have a question for you, Sarah, from previous guest Patty Voigt, who's CISO at Webster Bank. And she asks this question.
So I'm all about kind of looking at the horizon and what's up and coming. So I'm always interested in, what capabilities do others, peers of mine, CISOs across the organizations that they're in, what kind of capabilities, when they look out in the horizon, do they think they would like to see become available? And it may not even be something that's out on the market right now, but what are they most interested? What would they like to see on that horizon?
So I am a bit of a sci-fi fan, right?
Okay.
What I would actually like, if I was able to do anything, and I suspect this is actually possible now and I've just not seen it, I would like to be able to have a natural language, preferably voice, but typing would do, ability for anybody to speak to my IT organization and request anything through a single interface, like the computer in Star Trek. Hello, computer.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Little grey
I know
box.
exactly
That one. I want
Yes.
one of those for my organization because I think they deserve it. Because I don't think the people in my organization should have to understand how IT works. I think they should just know that they can go somewhere, ask for something in natural language, and have it happen for them. It's the extension of Agentics, right? It's further out than that, but it's a single interface at the beginning. That's what I want. In fact, I'm thinking I might need to build one because I think I need one for my team.
And finally, what question would you like me to put to a guest on a future episode of the show?
I think it would probably be something along the lines of, I would like to know what is the most difficult conversation that they have had recently with another member of the C-suite in their organization, where they've had to explain that the thing the person is asking for, which they think is simple, is actually not possible, and how they've gone about doing that.
Great question. Sarah, it's been fantastic to speak to you today. Thank you very much indeed for taking time out of your Friday afternoon to join us here on CXO Secrets.
You're welcome. Thanks, David.